It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Weather and temperature whiplash, weather weirding, weather whack-a-mole, and weather warfare, all are inseparable. Global covert climate intervention operations are wreaking havoc on an already collapsing planet. How bad will it get, and how soon? First headline, California slammed by much-needed rain and snow as major weather pattern shifts. That's from MSN. Yes, the big shift. As I said was coming in my last broadcast, the scheduled climate engineering chemical cool-down pendulum swing from the East Coast to the West Coast. Because without that several-day dash of chemical ice nucleation winter in the way too warm West, populations might start to realize something is very wrong with the weather and in our skies. More on the West Coast engineered winter weather whiplash in a moment. On the other side of the lower 48, where the so-called Sunshine State was recently colder than parts of Greenland and Iceland. From the IRStar.com, Florida is set for a sudden weather swing again, with temperatures jumping from recent chill to potential record highs before dropping down again. Yes, engineered winter weather whiplash. For the record, Florida has gone from a recent wind chill temperature of 8 degrees to a scheduled temperature of near 90 degrees over a very small window of time. That's not nature. That's climate engineering and chemical ice nucleation operations. Very cold, dense layer of air at the ground. 1,000 feet up, the temperatures might be 20 degrees warmer or more. No one's talking about that. The atmosphere is stratifying. So is the ocean. It's not mixing. And this is a very, very dire harbinger for life on Earth. From Fox News, another report on the same theme. Weather whiplash, aftermath, hundreds of crashes reported in Minnesota. More in Minnesota from Yahoo News. Minnesota winter weather whiplash, 409 crashes in Minnesota storm. Yep, lots and lots of crashes on that super slick, surfactant-soaked, chemically nucleated snow and ice. For those new to this broadcast, surfactants are what makes soap slippery. Surfactants are named in climate engineering patents as an element to reduce coagulation of already toxic climate engineering elements. Starting with aluminum nanoparticles, the surfactants keep them from, again, coagulating together, which makes the bigger particle descend faster. That's what they don't want. That's why they're using surfactants. Do the weather terrorists care about the crashing chaos and carnage that surfactants cause on the ground? Of course they don't care. In fact, increasingly, the more that populations are mired in their own misery and struggle, so much the better for the power structure, because those kinds of populations that can barely keep their head above the waterline or deal with the disasters around them are not very focused on what the criminal cabals in power are doing. That's the way it works. Moving on, more weather whiplash, whack-a-mole warfare. From X.com, WFLA Jeff Baradelli, so-called weather expert. This headline, weather whiplash returns to the south and the east. They sure like that word now, don't they? Report says by mid to late week, record heat will spread eastward, making for a toasty late week. Big joke, huh, Jeff? And weekend, then a strong cold surge early next week reminds us it's still winter, from 30 degrees above normal to 15 degrees below for some. Don't get caught off guard, but enjoy the ride, so says Jeff Baradelli. This is, again, chemical ice nucleation and winter weather warfare, and we have the so-called weather experts, cowards that they are, pretending this is just nature, just old man winter. Should a link to the Geoengineering Watch documentary, The Dimming, be forwarded to so-called weather expert Jeff Baradelli, and perhaps openly CC as many other aware and awake individuals as possible, so that Baradelli knows many are waiting for him to explain why he is completely ignoring the climate engineering elephant in the equation? You decide. Let's keep going. More headlines. South faces dangerous weekend. Severe weather threat with increased risk of tornadoes and damaging hail. That's from Fox Weather. Yes, the ever more extreme hail, the chemically nucleated kind, the baseball and softball size kind. Welcome to climate engineering and, again, chemical ice nucleation operations. And for those that don't believe engineered winter weather operations on this scale are possible, I understand. All I've ever asked for on this broadcast is honest, objective investigation. Start by searching this headline: Chinese scientist engineer snowstorm. All Matrix Media covered that. Can't bring it up in the U.S., though, or you'll be accused of wearing a tinfoil hat. Can't be done, they say. Really? The Chinese can do it, but the exponentially larger and more funded U.S. military can't? For those that want to be more effective and efficient in this fight and want to understand this core component of climate engineering, which for some unknown reason only geoengineeringwatch.org is trying to address, let's hope that changes, because this part of climate engineering needs to be understood. Search the Engineering Winter section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Understand these patented processes of chemical ice nucleation and the engineered winter weather warfare they create, and help to disseminate credible data on this issue so that people understand what's creating this winter weather whiplash, flash surface freezes. It's not nature, it's chemical ice nucleation. And again, the massive militaries of the US, Europe, and Russia are all conducting exactly the same operations as the Chinese, as they have openly announced they are conducting. From ABC, near 70 degrees, thunderstorms, and snowflakes. Another headline of weather whiplash ahead, they say. This headline highlights the northern tier states near the Great Lakes. Back to California from kpfa.org. California's climate whiplash. That word is sure preferred now, isn't it, by all the Matrix Media, weather disseminating agencies, Weather Channel, Weather Central, Weather Nation, and all their script-reading so-called climate expert cowards that are towing the line, repeating the narrative that's passed down to them ultimately from Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, who do all the weather modeling for the National Weather Service and NOAA. Giant planetary Truman Show with climate engineering wreaking havoc everywhere and contaminating everything. So, about California, here's a few excerpts from AccuWeather and their scheduled occurrences this week. 48 degrees, it shows rain changing to snow. Why would that be? Next day, Wednesday, they say showers of snow, then rain. That's at 45 degrees and 41. Why is it snowing at 45 degrees? Next day, again, scripted weather from AccuWeather, showers of snow, then rain. That goes from 52 degrees with showers of snow and then rain at 31 degrees. Why would that be? Snow at 51 degrees and rain at 31 degrees. Thursday morning of this week, I woke up to about a foot of chemical snow that up to that day on my Northern California wilderness mountaintop, there had not been a single freezing temperature this winter. During the late night hours, a parade of jets could be heard off and on above the chemically laden cloud canopy. And that's what's coming into the U.S. West, by the way. It's not organized anything. It's the most bizarre, never seen anything like this in 30 years of observing these data loops. Just broken up, speckled, unorganized moisture that somehow magically turns to frozen precipitation the moment it gets over land. It disperses much of that moisture. Again, the endothermic reaction consumes much of that moisture, but on Wednesday night, Thursday morning, you could hear this parade of jets, and there's no commercial routes in the airspace above my wilderness location. So what am I hearing? And just like so many previous years, the deciduous trees had already begun leafing out 2 months early. Fruit trees and native shrubs like manzanita had long since flowered in January, and yet again, all gets decimated by the chemical ice nucleation winter weather warfare being waged by completely out of control and absolutely desperate money printing from thin air controllers that consider populations a rapidly increasing liability on a dying planet. And the decimation of the natural flowering flora, fruit-producing flora like manzanita, will create a great deal of starvation amongst the fauna that's left in this area. So many animals will starve because nothing will produce on these plants that have bloomed and then been frozen. Culling the herd by 1,000 cuts, and not just the herd of fauna, but human herd as well. On that theme, this headline: Trump order pushes glyphosate production, Roundup chemical hated by MAHA. That's from CNBC. From that report, President Donald Trump invoked the Defense Production Act to promote the production of phosphorus and glyphosate. Do you think this cast of clowns, or any other cast of clowns that occupies the White House, I don't care what their political stripe is, do you think these people really give a damn about what's being sprayed on us? You think they have any power to stop it? No, they don't. They're there for their own ends. That's exactly how it works. Again, don't care about their political stripe. This is a criminal cabal masquerading as our government. Both stripes. Two sides of the same coin. So again, pushing the ramping up of glyphosate production, really, this can't be true. Making America healthy again by ramping up glyphosate production under the guise of national defense? First, again, the occupants of the White House are not the top of the power pyramid, no matter their political stripe. Next, if pumping out even more glyphosate into an already sick from 1,000 directions population is, quote, national defense, must one not ask exactly who are they defending against? Are they defending against the population that may soon wake up and reach the proverbial pitchforks and torches moment? Let's add this from CNBC. It gets worse. Kennedy, as in RFK Jr., defends Trump glyphosate order. MAHA movement erupts as midterms approach. From that report, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. defended President Donald Trump's executive order spurring the domestic production of glyphosate. The Make America Healthy Again coalition, which contributed to Trump's victory in 2024, is reeling after the executive order. The move risks splintering Trump's MAHA support in the lead up to the 2026 midterm elections. We have way bigger problems in those elections, by the way, for those that don't know it. All of us are knee-deep on the Titanic. Don't believe it? You will. Wait and see. But about this splintering of the MAHA movement, really, just quote splintering? That's it? How many will actually overlook the glyphosate insanity as they have overlooked the shocking Epstein debacle? What will it take to activate a moral compass on so many that are desperately trying to remain in a complete coma at the wheel? And this includes the environmental left as well, that can't bring themselves to face the geoengineering elephant in the sky. There's more than enough denial to go around, and too many on the right that believe nothing will hurt the planet. You can loot, plunder, pillage, and pollute until nothing is left, everything's fine, only climate engineering is hurting anything. That's wrong also. More than enough denial to go around. It's an all-of-the-above equation. Anything that negatively impacts the planet's energy balance and the planet's life support systems is a part of the problem. And there are so many factors. Where would one start? But climate engineering, short of nuclear cataclysm, is the most dire and immediate threat we collectively face. And there's no discussion about climate, anything from any direction or from any perspective, without first and foremost addressing the climate engineering elephant in the equation. Remember that. That's how you build bridges instead of burning them. Stick to that mantra. The report continues. Reiterating this point, Secretary of Health and Human Services Robert F. Kennedy Jr. defended President Donald Trump's executive order spurring the domestic production of glyphosate as his Make America Healthy Again movement reels from the president's embrace of the chemical they despise. Trump on Wednesday night signed an executive order invoking the Defense Production Act to compel the domestic production of elemental phosphorus and glyphosate-based herbicides. Glyphosate is the chemical in Bayer Monsanto's weed killer concoction. Roundup is the most commonly used weed killer for a slew of U.S. crops. Trump, in the executive order, said shortages of both phosphorus and glyphosate would pose a risk to national security. Really? The report then cites RFK as stating this: Donald Trump's executive order puts America first, where it matters most, our defense readiness and our food supply. We must safeguard America and America's national security first because of all our priorities that depend on it, end quote. Wow, that's a shocker, isn't it? Let's stop there. Just to make clear for the record, RFK has remained completely silent on the highly toxic weather warfare raging in our skies. And now, RFK Jr. is advocating for full speed ahead on radically ramping up glyphosate production? Is that how we make America healthy again? Really? I must have missed something. The report then continues, if Secretary Kennedy remains at HHS after this, it will be impossible to argue that his past warnings about glyphosate were anything more than a campaign rhetoric designed to win trust and votes, end quote. That's from the report. Report then states, Ken Cook, president of the Environmental Working Group, a watchdog that has pushed back against chemicals in food for years, said in a statement that he, quote, can't envision a bigger middle finger to every Maha mom than this, end quote. More from the report. Kennedy, a former environmental attorney, notably once won a nearly $290 million case against Monsanto for a man who claimed his cancer was caused by Roundup, aka glyphosate. The executive order came down one day after Bayer, the chemical company, proposed paying $7.25 billion to settle a series of lawsuits claiming Roundup causes cancer. Former Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene knocked Trump for signing an executive order protecting cancer-causing glyphosate in our foods. Next, listen carefully to the following from Trump-backed legislators in the White House. Glyphosate is a critical chemical to American agriculture. It's applied to many key cash crops such as corn and soybeans and has been defended by agricultural trade organizations. They continue. Phosphorus is a key input to the creation of glyphosate, which the White House argues is necessary to maintain food security. Elemental phosphorus is also used in the manufacture of some military materials. Let's stop there. There it is. Key to maintaining toxic food for the masses and for military materials. Final excerpt from the report. Quote, thank you, President Trump, for acknowledging the importance of glyphosate-based herbicides in American agriculture. That was from the House Agricultural Committee. They said that Wednesday night on an X post. They then continued, this is a vital step forward in ensuring a domestic supply of this critical crop input remains available for our producers. So, there you have it. Making America healthy again by ramping up the glyphosate, and let's spray it on everything. And never mind the grid pattern making geoengineering jets in our skies spewing their toxic filth that's tainting every drop of rain, thus every drop of water, every bite of food, thus every breath we take. It's all just jet exhaust. So says Lee Zeldin, head of the EPA, which, again, for the record, is also virtually gutting any and every form of environmental protection across the board, including climate monitoring, which is what we use to track geoengineering operations they don't want you to know about. So much for transparency. Again, anyone who thinks that those masquerading as legitimate government in the U.S. are anything more than a criminal cabal who's beholden to the behind-the-curtain money printers, think again. Think again. Connect the dots. Doesn't matter the political stripe. Doesn't matter. Moving on. Again, this final bit of reassurance on the big ramp-up of glyphosate production. The chemical companies are going to pay you for the inconvenience of the cancers that their concoctions might cause. From Fox News, this headline. Bayer proposes $7.25 billion plan to settle Roundup cancer lawsuits. The pharmaceutical and agricultural giant is seeking court approval for a nationwide class agreement tied to Roundup claims, those who got cancer from this concoction, as legal costs mount and cash flow tightens. So, again, there you have it. Nothing to worry about. Your settlement check is in the mail. Try not to breathe. Try not to eat any food. Try not to drink any water. Making America healthy again. This is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the weekly installment of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Report, The End of the World as We Know It broadcast, brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare. Quick footnote for those that truly want to help sound the alarm and to move this fight forward. Very effective climate engineering awareness raising materials are available on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Full color printed materials, which we pass on for less than our cost of producing and shipping. We also have Geoengineering Watch shirts, restock sizes, new colors, and the printed materials are the best key to the door. If our 20-page booklets don't wake somebody up to this issue, they're not going to wake up. Don't waste your time. But that's how you plant a seed that can grow as unfolding events force it to grow. Force people to wake up, force them to rip their head out of the sand. Moving on. For those that don't succumb to cancer from chemicals from everywhere, food we eat, to the skies, the air we're breathing, the government is working on accommodations for you as collapse unfolds regarding another power structure puzzle piece that is also directly related to tightening the noose of total control from UK Guardian. Follow-up story, ongoing story, ICE to spend $38 billion turning warehouses into detention centers, documents show. Yep, not just for immigrants, for any that don't toe the line as collapse unfolds. Again, this recap. Those behind the curtain control it all. Doesn't matter the political stripe. So during the Biden administration, they knocked down the border walls, scattered immigrants everywhere to provide the premise for the establishment of the private army that is ICE, that has funding bigger than most militaries in the world except for two. So stop and consider it's all part of the plan. Those behind the curtain, those who control the flow of money, they control it all. They control militaries, they control countries, they control most members in government. Those who they don't control know who they are. And they are few and courageous, and I salute them. But they also control most of matrix media. So what do we see week after week after week? Headlines on a single kidnap victim, while literally tens of thousands are dying around the globe from collapsing ecosystems, collapsing countries. We have murder and mayhem being committed all over the world, and we're seeing the same over and over headlines on a single individual. It's tragic, I agree, but does it outweigh everything else? I don't think so. Does it outweigh what's taking place in our sky, which is literally planetary genocide, and not a word said about that? Not a word. It's omnicide. Death of all life. We are hurtling toward imminent impact, and we are seeing whatever matrix media wants to show us, wants to distract us with, wants to feed normalcy bias with. That's what we see. Switching gears to the other side of the world, still on the same theme in a way, as it's a form of biowarfare, form of poisoning life, the remaining life. From CCN News Australia, Wild Rabbit Control Program set for March 2nd. Land Services Central Coast Council will participate in the program to release the rabbit hemorrhagic disease virus RHDV1-K5. What in the hell is that? Is that a form of Marburg or Ebola for rabbits? How soon till it jumps to us with the gain of function characteristic? Is this their experiments to get that process going? Yes, more forms of biological warfare are being waged against any form of life that has so far been resilient enough to survive in the increasingly toxic planetary fishbowl. Anyone know about the 1080 poisoning of wildlife in the southern hemisphere? Look that one up. Truly shocking. 2,000-pound buckets of poisoned carrots being distributed all over the landscape, supposedly to kill some sort of invasive species, killing everything. What does it take for the public to reach the pitchforks and torches moment? What's it take? Moving on, back to the battlefield in our atmosphere. From theconversation.com, a report that is referring to Australia, though it should be taken in a global context. Quote, here's the headline: dramatic changes in upper atmosphere are responsible for recent droughts and bushfires, new research shows. Really? Is that all it is? Nothing to do with the climate engineering elephant in the sky. That's not responsible for droughts, bushfires, deluges. Nearly the whole of the so-called climate science community are a pack of cowards, absolute cowards. I don't care if their paychecks or pensions depend on them towing the line for this narrative. There's no honor in towing the line on a sinking ship just to protect your personal paradigm till the last possible moment. What's life about? Why are we here? The only thing we own is our honor, our God-given sense of honor. And when you lose that, you have nothing left, nothing. And I've never seen so much cowardice as that from the ranks of the so-called climate scientists and so many in the ranks of the medical industrial complex who are still towing the line for so-called safe and effective concoctions which are anything but. What's wrong with our species, and how can people not see the tidal wave looming over our collective heads of total collapse? It's already happening. It's already unfolding. It's not over the horizon somewhere. It's here. It's kicking in the front door now. And for the record, firestorm smoke is being utilized as a form of climate engineering. That's how desperate they are. It's like mimicking a volcano by pumping this smoke into the atmosphere. The hotter the fires burn, the more it serves the climate engineering agenda. That's in both hemispheres. Search the engineering wildfire section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Better still, search wildfires serve geoengineering agenda and share that link. Help us to share credible data. We can't do it on our own. If you're just listening to a broadcast once a week and posting a comment and doing nothing else, we're not going to make it through what we face. No chance. No one will. But if we all stand together, if we all do our part to start spot fires of awareness, share credible data from a credible source, ask others to do the same, if we all did that, we would reach a critical mass of awareness in time to alter this equation. Doesn't mean our problems are over. We are going to hit the wall. That's a given. But we could alter the complexion of collapse. And perhaps someone might make it through what's coming, and that's worth fighting for. From phys.org, study finds reduction of aerosols in cloud cover drives increase in solar radiation over Europe. Now, this is a headline we need to look through. This is a form of advocating for increased geoengineering operations to put more aerosols into the sky. This is advocating in a behind-the-curtain sense to incinerating more forests to put more smoke in the air, because that's their idea of a fix. Just put so much filth in the skies that it blocks so much of the sun, it will cool things down temporarily and toxically while eliminating what little is left of the planet's life support systems. What a great idea. Absolute insanity. That's what's running the whole show right now. The inmates are absolutely positively running the asylum. We know from psychoanalysis the profile of those in power. There are various forms of psychosis include a common thread, and that is a near total lack of comprehension as to the consequences to their actions, even to themselves. Anyone who can't see that we are about to hit the wall at full velocity has their eyes wide shut. From the UK Guardian, daunting but doable. Europe urged to prepare for 3 degrees C of global heating. A little late to prepare for that. Based on unfiltered frontline data, we are past 3.5 degrees C and hurtling to temperatures that will eliminate all life on Earth. In fact, a recent statement from the polar scientists indicates, in their opinion, we may have an additional 3 degrees C of warming this year alone, and perhaps another 5 degrees C more next year. If that happens, we are done. And climate engineering, the attempt to mask the severity and immediacy of what's unfolding, is actually further fueling the fire, in addition to being a form of chemical and biological warfare. Toxic elements, synergistically toxic elements, and what other pathogens are woven into this mix, we can't know. But we do know that polymer fibers and graphene are part of this mix. We do know that those elements are used militarily for biological carrier platforms, for biological warfare. Why would we think they're not going to dump something far more lethal on us when they really begin to lose control, which is already happening? From this report, advisory board member says Europe already paying price for lack of preparedness, but adapting is, quote, not rocket science. You can't adapt to a dead planet. Okay, let's make that clear. You cannot adapt to a dead planet. That is total nonsense. That's like the garbage we get from the climate science community saying we can put Brazil-sized balloons in space and we can cover the polar regions with reflective tarps and we can build undersea walls to prop up the glaciers that are collapsing all over the world. It's total nonsense. Total distractionary nonsense. Moving on, from Futurism.com, Earth on track to become uninhabitable. Oops. Yeah, where have I heard that? For the last 15 years at Geoengineeringwatch.org, and it's taken them that long to admit it here. The report says policymakers and the public remain largely unaware, that's true, of the risks posed by what would effectively be a point of no return transition. We're past that point. How many times have I said on this broadcast, we are in the Thelma and Louise moment? You don't know what that means. Maybe you didn't see that movie because it's been around for a while. Search it and take a look. 2 occupants of a car that have crashed through the guardrail, sailing through the air on the way to the bottom of the canyon. Yeah, they're fine for the moment. They can change the radio station, maybe have a little conversation before the moment of impact. But that's the moment we're in right now, knee deep in water on the deck of the Titanic. The report says a new study in the journal One Earth shows multiple climate systems. The Greenland ice sheet, the West Antarctic ice sheet, boreal permafrost, the Amazon rainforest, and much more are all much closer to collapse than previously thought. Yep, there it is again. Oh my God, it's way worse than we thought. We didn't know. How come I knew at geoengineeringwatch.org? How come I've been trumpeting that alarm, no pun intended, for over a decade and a half, and now they're just catching up? The so-called climate science community is just now beginning to admit to the truth, as if it's not towering over our heads and should be painfully obvious to anybody that, again, doesn't have their eyes wide shut. The report then states the analysis is based on climate tipping points. How many times have I been over that on this broadcast? Cascading collapse, tipping points that once triggered can't be shut off, meaning collapses of environmental systems that lead to other climate systems beyond their own tipping points, creating a cascading scenario, what I just said, right? Where the planet spirals into a worst case scenario known as a hothouse Earth. Went over that in last week's broadcast and many others before it. Under this scenario, the report states the long-term temperature is projected to rise about 9 degrees Fahrenheit above pre-industrial averages, which would be really bad. That's not my words. That's exactly what the report says, which would be really bad. You think? That's called Venus syndrome, and it doesn't stop at 9 degrees. There's no magic barrier where the thermostat shuts everything down. It keeps going until Earth is a lifeless ball of scorched rock, and anybody that thinks that's impossible, that's a delusion. It's a total delusion propagated by the cowards in the climate science community that somehow there's some sort of magic natural limit beyond which everything will fix itself and we'll all live happily ever after. Good luck with that. Final excerpt from the report says, quote, "Unfortunately, the power to reverse these decisions doesn't belong to the people, but to a small cabal of the ultra-rich." Yeah, the money printers from behind the curtain and all the clowns that masquerade at the end of their strings. They say the future of the planet is so far out of control that some environmental experts argue not even the world's most powerful governments can stop the collapse at this point. Exactly. Car going 100 miles an hour, 5 feet from impact. You can pump those brakes all you want. That car's going to hit. It's going to be ugly, and that is our situation. The question now is, can anyone survive that impact? And if we don't stop what's happening in our skies soon, the answer is no, no. Unless or until we stop the intentional interference with the planet's primary life support systems, what's left of them, and allow the planet to respond on its own. If we don't stop that interference very soon, no chance. None. Zero. Moving on, let's add this to the darkening horizon of doom. From worldenergydata.org, scientists thought they understood global warming, then the past 3 years happened. From the report, we're not continuing on the same path we had before. That's a statement from Robert Rowe, chief scientist at Berkeley Earth. Something has changed, he said. Yes, it has. Look up, Robert. You might get a clue. He then says the past warming rate is no longer a reliable predictor of the future. How many times on this broadcast have I said exactly that? Robert, what took you so long to catch up? Do you need to view a link to the dimming? I would think so. Because I've stated so many times in this broadcast, the equation is now non-linear. That's exactly what he's saying. You can't look backward and think that's some sort of measure for what's going to happen looking forward. That's not the case. We've leapt from the 100-story building, the human race, metaphorically, thinking they were flying, and now we're passing the second story, and the pavement is the next stop, and that's going to be a rough landing. Count on that. Now for the really bad news from the UK Guardian. Coffee growing countries becoming too hot to cultivate coffee beans. Analysis finds that's just the beginning. That's the least of our problems. From Fox News, I'm going to slam through a bunch of headlines I missed earlier. I just want to cover them, and then I'm going to get to some more important points in a moment, but I want to just make mention of these headlines. Fox News, California slammed by, quote, dangerous storm. They want to really sensationalize everything. 8 feet of snow and life-threatening floods. They always do that. They'll film the same super flooded areas while other areas didn't get much of anything, and they paint a picture of California not being in drought, for example, which is nonsense. And we're still low in snow for all the western mountains, especially the further north you head, the worse it gets. But they want to distract people with these sensationalized headlines, and they're climate engineering the hell out of all this. There's nothing natural in any of it. From Fox News, monster storms flood parts of California with rounds of heavy rain as extreme snow slams the Sierra Nevada. We'll see how much moisture comes out of that chemically nucleated mess, or if they even hit anywhere near the snow totals that they claimed were coming. Some claimed 15 feet. That's not going to happen. And when you go back 3 decades or so, it was not unusual to get 5 or 6 feet in some of these high locations in the snow, and now they make it sound like it's snowmageddon every time it happens. From the New York Times, more snow in Florida than Utah? Question mark. Why weird weather has dominated this year? Yes, New York Times, why? How about acknowledging the climate engineering elephant in the equation? For the record, I had an interview request from the New York Times, but they stomped it out. Somebody stomped it out before it hit the finish line. Just like BBC, just like USA Today, just like National Geographic, and CNN, the most recent 20-minute conversation with their head of video production. Never heard a word back because someone certainly put their boot on it, just like happened with Chuck Norris. Never heard from Chuck again. Merle Haggard was going to do something with Willie Nelson. There's a long list. And certainly those in power cannot afford to have this reach fruition, but they do seem to allow a certain amount of data to be disseminated because in some way, perhaps they feel the public has been told and they didn't care. So maybe that justifies in their mind what they're doing. Next headline from Newsweek. Florida town has gotten 13 times as much snow as Salt Lake City. That's just changed. They couldn't afford to have that headline around for long, could they? So they just made sure that went away. They dropped a little snow in Salt Lake City. Good for them. the weather terrorists. From AccuWeather, winter is getting shorter across nearly 200 cities, new climate analysis finds. Yeah, it's getting a hell of a lot shorter. Again, Northern California haven't had a freeze until this week. All the trees blooming, budding. And why did the trees go dormant to begin with? Because there are absolutely synthesized elements in fall rains that force deciduous trees into dormancy. We identified that working with the University of Minnesota. Agricultural groups in California, orchards are using these chemicals and have been for a very long time to force their trees into dormancy, because if the trees don't have a certain amount of downtime, they won't produce anything. It's not getting cold enough to create that downtime without those chemicals forcing them into dormancy. And so now we have the chemically nucleated cold that's going to obliterate any budding and blooming on the trees. It's absolutely total annihilation of the flora everywhere. Next headline from the dailycaller.com. State of emergency declared as Florida faces worst drought in 25 years amid hundreds of wildfires. The geoengineers can cut the flow of precipitation off for as long as they want, wherever they want. That's how it works. They control the spigot. From the weathernetwork.com, warming temperatures are shrinking snowpack in key Canadian watersheds. Yes, they are. And the sublimating chemically nucleated material reduces the runoff even further. Keep that in mind. Next headline from Newsweek, Lake Powell water could drop to critical levels sooner than expected. There it is again, worse than expected across the board. That's how the system works. The so-called experts, whether it's the medical industrial complex or the so-called climate science community, they are trained, programmed, paid to deny threats, to downplay threats, to ignore threats, and to pacify populations. And there are exceptions. I don't want to paint with too broad a brush. There are people in the medical industry that do miraculous things. Surgeries, for example. And I know from my own family this to be the case, and I'm very grateful to those surgeons and the miracles they can perform. But there are elements in these massive manipulated arenas that are anything but benevolent. And that needs to be rooted out and not ignored any longer. But for those that are doing miraculous things in the medical industry with repairing broken people and so forth, and I know about this firsthand from my long list of injuries from living too precariously early on in my life, but they can absolutely do miraculous things. I'm grateful for that. But the other, again, malevolent factors need to be exposed. From Yahoo News, 10 countries investing heavily in weather modification technologies. This is mass distraction. Again, trying to blur the line between localized cloud seeding operations and climate engineering. They are completely and totally different, and too many people, even in so-called alt media, are trying to blur that line. Not the same. The localized cloud seeding operations mean nothing against the backdrop of climate intervention operations. And they list the countries: United Arab Emirates, India, Australia, Thailand, Israel, South Korea. There's many, many more. But again, articles like this try to confuse the population as to the difference between localized, publicized cloud seeding. Single aircraft may drop maybe a few dozen pounds of material at best, depending on the aircraft, compared to a military tanker that can dump nearly 100 tons of toxic material in a single flight. So we're talking about two completely different threats here. One is an elephant, one's an ant. More headlines, another from Yahoo News. Climate science, hydroclimate whiplash. The report says rapid swings in weather extremes are becoming more common as the world warms. Yes, and also as climate engineering is ramped up even further. It's an all-the-above equation. It is criminal to omit the climate engineering element from any report, from any media source. From Yale Climate Connections, despite eastern U.S. cold, January 2026 was one of the world's warmest Januaries on record. That's because the eastern half of the U.S. lower 48 isn't a snapshot of the whole world. But for people who live there, they think it is. And if they went through the chemical cool downs, they somehow wonder what the ruckus is about the rest of the world being warm because it wasn't warm outside their front door. No, it was chemically cooled. So let's look at some records here. This is a total of record colds compared to record warm in the last 5+ years. In Florida, for example, Miami, 115 record warms to 1 record cold. New Orleans, 110 record warms to 7 record colds. And those record colds are from chemical ice nucleation, so there wouldn't be any without that. Atlanta, 37 record warm, 0 record cold. St. Louis, Missouri, 32 record-setting highs compared to 1 record low. Phoenix, Arizona, 138 record-breaking highs compared to 0 record lows. Chicago, 27 record-breaking highs compared to 0 record lows. Where's that coming ice age? Where's that planetary cooling? How come those people don't look at real data like this when they're jumping up and down over a chemical cool down and the iguanas falling from the trees and they're claiming that's signs of a coming ice age? How incredibly moronic is that narrative? And when will those people be held to account and their ridiculous narratives ignored and climate engineering put as the focus of what we need to face, or we're done? There's so many headlines to cover. I'm not going to get to them all, but I'm going to rifle through as many as I can. From AP News, scientific studies calculate climate change as health danger, while President Trump calls it a, quote, scam. Let's stop there. Really? The planet's collapsing life support systems and the complete contamination of the same from countless sources, with climate engineering being at the top of the list, is just a, quote, scam? Well, Trump's big increase in glyphosate production and dispersion, that'll fix everything, right? From phys.org, the hidden impact of polluted snow. Wonder how it got so polluted. Tiny amounts of industrial pollution trapped in snow can change how sunlight reaches the ground below and significantly alter fragile environments. How about the toxic elements in that snow contaminating everything, killing soil microbiome, killing root systems? Now let's add a whole bunch more glyphosate on top of the climate engineering fallout and industrialized pollution. Nothing's going to be left alive soon. That is the course we're on. As I cover the next headline, remember, climate engineering operations, polymer, nanoparticles, part of that mix. Keep that in mind. From Earth.com, disturbing study finds microplastic accumulation in human brains, primarily in dementia patients. Again, ongoing story, getting worse all the time. And all of us have these materials in us. Now let's add the toxic heavy metals, nanoparticles of every description, all individually toxic. But when you combine them, they're synergistically toxic. It's a wonder any of us are walking and talking. From EPA.gov, translation, the EPA's own website, President Trump and Administrator Zeldin deliver single largest deregulatory action in U.S. history. Translation, they are gutting environmental everything across the board. Make America healthy again. Make America great again. Right. From healthpolicy.new, U.S. EPA stops regulating climate pollution, says it's not a health concern, which would include climate engineering fallout for them. Again, gutting of everything, every form of protection. It's loot, plunder, pillage, and pollute until nothing is left. From UK Guardian, Trump named undisputed champion of beautiful clean coal. Clean coal, what an oxymoron that is. More dire news. From extremetemps.com, NASA observations reveal a steady shrinkage of cloud cover, which is deeply worrying. I've covered this on many other broadcasts. It's an ongoing story. This is an immediate existential threat. The report then states, loss of the tropical stratocumulus cloud decks is predicted to result in a cataclysmic 8 degrees C height. That's about 15 degrees Fahrenheit. It's already happening, and it's not just tropical stratocumulus. We're not seeing convective cumulus clouds in Northern California almost at all. There's very few. Again, this is a transition to Venus syndrome. This is when the climate engineers, the weather terrorists, the criminal cabals masquerading as our governments are literally destroying the planet's own cloud-making processes in lieu of the highly toxic nanoparticle filth that they spew into our skies to allow them to manipulate what's left of the planet's life support systems until nothing is left. Nothing. And we are so perilously close to that point. For the record, geoengineering operations are the single greatest factor decimating the planet's cloud production processes. You're listening to the weekly installment of Global Alert News, the Bad News Broadcast, installment number 550, February 21st, 2026. This is Dane Wigington, your host. Global Alert News brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate intervention operations known as geoengineering. Global Alert News aired on a number of AM/FM stations around the country. We pay for that out of pocket. If any radio station is willing to air the GAN broadcast near you in order to inform their listeners of what Matrix Media won't mention, have them contact us at admin@geoengineeringwatch.org. We'll grant them access to our weekly broadcast for free. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News report can be found on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org under the recent column and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming. This is the A to Z on the climate engineering issue. The Dimming fully exposes the climate engineering atrocities. Best way to share, circulate the direct link to The Dimming by email directly from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. When viewing our YouTube of the dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube, please subscribe, share, and comment, all of which helps us to circulate critically important data to a much wider audience. About reaching those that still are not looking up and connecting the dots. Start a conversation. Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials are very key and effective in doing so. They can be found on our homepage. Our only goal, give activists what they need to move this fight forward. Reaching a critical mass of awareness, it is the only way forward in this fight. If we can expose it fully and our military brothers and sisters know what they're involved with, a planet-killing operation that them, their posterity, everyone will soon pay the price if it's not stopped. We would hope that they would stand down because they did take an oath not to follow any illegal orders and to protect their countrymen from all threats, foreign and domestic. Back to more bad news breaking reports, but first, my deepest gratitude to each and every individual that's doing their best, given their individual circumstances and situations, to help sound the alarm on the insanity taking place in our skies. You have my deepest gratitude, always. New from SciTechDaily.com. The Southern Indian Ocean is losing salt at an astonishing rate. All these are extremely dire harbingers. Nothing we see on the news while we're watching week after week of a single kidnap victim, again, which is tragic, but hardly comparable to the literal end of the world. This is the kind of reports that plug into our collective reality and what we will soon face. The lack of salt, they say, is due to rising temperatures over the past 60 years. That's not the entire truth at all, because the report then talks about altered major wind patterns and ocean currents. The climate engineers, more than any other factor, period, are altering upper-level wind currents, which in turn alters ocean currents, which is part of this equation that's affecting the currents in the Indian Ocean and everywhere else. And when those currents shut down, that is the circulatory system, the heat distribution system for the planet, and that is also an existential threat. There are so many converging existential threats, and the vast majority have absolutely no idea of the gravity and immediacy of our collective reality. From Popular Mechanics, Earth's disastrous 10th tipping point has been identified. Report says a 10th boundary that's gone unrecognized. That's not true at all. I brought this up so many times in this broadcast over a decade and a half. The Popular Mechanics report says this unrecognized threat concerns worldwide aquatic deoxygenation in lakes and oceans and other bodies of water. These are hypoxic and anoxic zones, the dead zones. It's happening all over the globe. There's well over 500 in oceans around the world. Again, what has taken the so-called climate science community or some of these publications, matrix media publications, what's taken them so long to tell the truth? The only reason they are now is because they can no longer hide it. Moving on the subject of hiding climate engineering, more from the so-called climate science community, the cowards that they are, attempting to completely obscure frequency transmissions that are used in atmospheric manipulation, a core part of climate engineering, and pretending that it's, quote, gravity waves. That's a cosmological phenomenon, but they put any label they want to make it sound like they are telling the truth when the truth is anything but what they're saying. From phys.org, capturing gravity waves, scientists break decades of gridlock in climate modeling. And then they try to explain away all the perfectly aligned ripples we see in clouds, the herringbone patterns that are frequency transmissions that often overlap perpendicularly depending on the overlapping of transmissions from different sources. Again, core part of climate engineering. These transmissions have a repelling effect on the now electrically conductive atmosphere that's saturated with these electrically conductive particles. And we have the climate science community trying to explain this away as something other than what it is, while they're ignoring the massive atmospheric blasting of frequency transmissions that is doing God knows what to what little is left of the atmosphere. And now on top of that, for gases like methane that are building up in the atmosphere, and that's an existential threat also by itself. We have massive blowouts occurring in the Arctic tundra, Arctic seafloor. Methane over a 10-year time horizon, 120 times more effective at trapping heat than CO2. We have Project Lucy and Project Alamo. Those are acronyms for the blasting of the atmosphere with opposing microwave frequencies to try to molecularly degrade some of the methane building up there. It's one layer of insanity on top of another, and we have the climate science community pretending the geoengineering jets aren't filling our skies with filth, pretending that ground-based frequency transmitters aren't manipulating that filth-filled atmosphere and pretending that climate engineering is just a dangerous proposal. Again, same rule applies. There is no legitimate discussion about climate, anything from any perspective, including the kind of report I just covered, without first and foremost addressing the climate engineering elephant in the equation. The planet's miraculous life support systems are failing. They're breaking down. They're unraveling by the day. And even now, so many in the ranks of the human race continue to actively or passively participate in what can only be called the collective insanity. Definition: the annihilation of consciousness. The annihilation of consciousness refers to the permanent cessation of subjective awareness, thought, and self-experience, typically occurring upon biological death. Here's a question. Has the annihilation of consciousness already been carried out on countless individuals that, though they can still walk and talk, are actually on autopilot, completely comatose at the wheel, completely and totally blind to the oncoming train of total collapse, blind to what's taking place in our skies? From geopolitics.com, this headline: the ruins of progress. When the economy stops producing a future and politics becomes waste management. Another question: how many will dig deep and summon the courage necessary to fully face what's unfolding, and with that courage, to do their individual part as best as they can, to make a difference for the better while they can, before they take their last breath? What we collectively face isn't just another crisis. It's not just a recessionary cycle that can be reversed by ingenious monetary policy or timely fiscal stimulus. What we are experiencing is far deeper. It's far more dire. It's far more structural, and in so many ways, terminal. Moral tales of greed or mismanagement aren't enough to understand this dysfunction. We need to abandon ethical illusions and return to a more relentless narrative, that of the political physics of energy, of entropy, and inevitable collapse. And those who, starting from the biophysical economics standpoint, always rightfully questioned the myth of infinite growth on a finite planet with finite resources. We were warned again and again and again. Industrialized, militarized, so-called society has functioned as a form of a heat engine on a planetary scale. Its expansion has been fueled by exceptional energy gradients, abundant coal and oil, cheap and disciplined human labor, territories to colonize, aka loot, plunder, pillage, and pollute until nothing is left, literally. Formerly cheap and abundant external energy sources made it possible to transform resources into useful work, commodities, surplus value, geopolitical power, and all the while the residual heat from the process was systematically externalized, and now the cascading consequences have come home to roost. For centuries, the system has been able to shift or dissipate this residual heat, this residue, to its peripheries, colonies, expendable populations, degraded ecosystems, and above all, to the future, which now will never be if we remain on the current course. And this has been the great material fiction of so-called progress, of so-called industrialized, militarized society. But no excess heat or toxic waste absorption well is infinite in a closed system, such as Earth. When the absorption capacity is exhausted, the law of thermodynamics imposes itself without any possibility of negotiation. When an environment becomes so saturated and so decimated and loses its capacity for expansion, the dynamics of relational disintegration, isolation, ecosystem implosion, and the collapse of social bonds emerge, aka a global Mad Max scenario. So do we lay down, give up, and yield to the collective insanity? No, never. Not an option. Consider this nugget of wisdom from martial arts legend Bruce Lee. Quote, "Defeat is a state of mind. No one is ever defeated until defeat has been accepted as a reality." And from Samuel Clemens, this: "Courage is resistance to fear, mastery of fear, not absence of fear." And from Nelson Mandela, quote, "I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear." End quote. Again, I ask, why are we here? For what point? For what purpose? What would we want our Maker to find us doing when we take our last breath? And for those with faith, for those that have dutifully exercised a philosophy of purpose with a sense of mission that is guided by a God-given moral compass, what is there to fear? If you know at your core that you have done your best to do your best, given your individual circumstances and situation, that's all there is. There is nothing else to fear. If we're to have any chance of extending our stay on this once thriving planet, it starts with fully exposing and halting what is taking place in our skies. Check the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for specific instructions on how you can help to move this fight forward. Please make your voice heard, make every single day count. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.